Yun na. Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you, thank you. Aya. Naibus. Naibus mine.
Hey man, question is, do you believe?
Now, I've been making videos about Project Zomboid since April of 2021, and much of that time has been focused around covering the development of the game itself. So when I was asked by the relatively new design director at the Indie Stone if I'd like to hold an interview with them, well, I couldn't really say no. What you're about to see is that interview with questions focused around the current state of Build 42 itself, what we as players can expect in the future, and a dive into some fairly controversial changes that we've seen recently. Hopefully this will serve to give you an insight into what goes on behind the scenes at Project Zomboid. So, Saralyn, thank you very much for joining me today. To kick things off, can we get a brief introduction from you and your role at the Indie Stone?
Yeah. So my name's Christian Allen, and I'm the
Now, I've been making videos about Project Zomboid since April of 2021, and much of that time has been focused around covering the development of the game itself. So when I was asked by the relatively new design director at the Indie Stone if I'd like to hold an interview with them, well, I couldn't really say no. What you're about to see is that interview with questions focused around the current state of Build 42 itself, what we as players can expect in the future, and a dive into some fairly controversial changes that we've seen recently. Hopefully this will serve to give you an insight into what goes on behind the scenes at Project Zomboid. So, Saralyn, thank you very much for joining me today. To kick things off, can we get a brief introduction from you and your role at the Indie Stone?
Yeah. So my name's Christian Allen, and I'm the relatively new now design director at the Indie Stone, focused on Project Zomboid. Quick introduction on me is I live in Washington in the United States. My background is I'm originally Alaskan. Grew up in Alaska, in the military for a bit, and then in the early 2000s got into video games. So I've been working in the games industry for way too too long now. And a lot of exciting things that I worked on in the background. But last year was talking to the IndieStone team, and the opportunity came up to join. So long story short, here I am.
Fabulous. So that's actually leads me quite nicely into my next question. Before you found yourself where you are now at the IndieStone, what kind of experience did you actually have in the games industry, and how exactly did you end up working on Project Zomboid?
Yeah, it's actually kind of a fascinating story. I joke that my interview at the IndieStone was the longest job interview I've ever had. My background in the games industry is long and varied. I started as a modder for Rainbow Six. That's kind of how I got into the games industry. I was making mods for Rainbow Six for my LAN group back home, and put those up on the internet. And decided I wanted to, well, I always have made games, but decided I could actually do games as a job, mainly by my wife telling me I either needed to quit modding all the time or get a job doing it. And okay, let's do that. So I started at Redstorm Entertainment, working on, originally got hired to do Rainbow Six, but much like the games industry, immediately got moved from Rainbow Six PC to Ghost Recon console. So my initial game development was primarily focused on the Xbox. Worked my way up pretty quickly from assistant designer, lead designer, creative director on the Ghost Recon franchise. From there, when I moved out to Washington, came out to Bungie, worked on Halo Reach for a couple of years. Spent some time at Warner Brothers Games, I worked on Lord of the Rings, Mad Max, some DC stuff. From there, I actually spun up my own indie studio. I did the thing that all AAA game developers try to do at some point, and go independent and start your own studio. Did that for about 6 years. We shipped a few different games, Takedown, Epsilon. I even did a weird VR super indie experimental title called Hotel Blind. And that's when I had transitioned over to Unreal Engine, because obviously Ghost Recon and Halo back then were both proprietary engines. When I went independent, started with Unreal 3 and then Unreal 4. And my tinkering and prototyping and making videos caught Epic's eye, and they brought me on to be an Unreal Engine evangelist. So it was working more on the developer side, focusing on indie game developers. So I essentially got paid by Epic for 6 years to talk to indie game developers all day long, give them technical advice, look at their blueprints, and I did a bunch of other stuff. I did touch Fortnite a little bit, did a bunch of stuff on Unreal Engine, but my primary focus was in that indie game space. And alongside all of that, way back in, I guess it was 2011, 2012, I bought this little game called Project Zomboid, and I've always been a zombie fan. I'm really into strategic and tactical and realistic games. I love RPGs. Played it on and off. I had actually reached out to the IndieStone way back when, before I started my own company, going, hey, I love your game. I love what you're doing. I was really impressed that they really pioneered kind of a business model of having a game in active development. We kept in touch at Game Developers Conference. I think it was like in 2015. We met up and chatted. And after I left Epic, I got caught in the great layoffs of 2023, and I was doing a bunch of consulting for game design consulting and biz dev consulting for a bunch of different companies. The IndieStone asked me to look at a couple different features. I wrote some designs for them, and that just kind of kept snowballing over the course of 2025 to where eventually I went out to Brighton, I met with the team, and this role became a reality. And along the way, I made some mods too. So it's a Cinderella story. It's been interviewing for this job since 2011, and finally landed it. I had to go make some AAA games and work with Hollywood to finally nail the gig, but I got it.
So I have a quick question. You mentioned in there that you started the game in 2011. Am I correct in saying that would have been the Desura days, or
Yeah.
was that? Yeah, it was. So you've got much more experience in Project Zomboid than me. I think I picked it up in 2013 when it released on Steam. It's really nice to hear about your history with the game. You actually knew the game a long time before you got involved with the development of it, which I think is so crucial for a role like design director. And I have to squeeze in there as well, Halo Reach, one of my all-time favorite games, one of my all-time favorites. So thank you for your work on that as well. So I don't think that I'm alone in noticing that updates are much more frequent now. I think we're at a point now where we're seeing about an update every month, at least for the last few months. What can you tell us about what's going on behind the scenes right now with the team? And have there been any big changes with the team's work process or structure since you've joined as design director?
Definitely, you've seen the change in, trying to put out a little more communication, trying to put out a little more direction as far as, why decisions are made and why features are updated. The development process in the Indie Zone and for Project Zomboid specifically is different than obviously a lot of other places in the games industry and has both its unique rewards and its unique challenges. And one of those is that a lot of times features, as they're being developed, they get implemented in stages, right? One thing has to come online to support another thing, And in more traditional release schedules, even, something like Fortnite that has chapters that are, kind of self-contained modules that come out in a lot of places, or in more traditional old school AAA development where you have the main game and it launches and then it's done and you can never touch it and maybe you can do DLC packs or expansion pack or something. A lot of times if they're ready to go, they need to be included in a release because it's a core fundamental change, kind of under the hood, and you can't just put this off in a little corner if you're changing something that affects lots of different systems. But then you might not have the entire chunk of content come out all at the same time. So someone might see a change, like for example, ammunition changes. If you remember, there was an update a few times ago where it was like, hey, we changed, combined 223 and 556 and changed a bunch of the underlying ammunition systems. Well, obviously, I'd already designed the weapons that were going to go along with that. Those two things couldn't go out together. You had to make the core underlying change first, test it, have it in, and then you've got a release right in there for other features to support it. You can't just rip it out. So it needs to go out, it needs to be integrated, and then the weapons come out. Now, I would say there's sometimes a hesitancy. You don't want to necessarily go, hey, we're changing all, there's a bunch of new weapons that are going to come out, in 2 months. Because you don't necessarily know, which one of those are going to work, which one of those are going to be fun. We haven't implemented it yet. So there's a challenge on that front. I put out a blog post, I think, in February, and I recognize that looking at the feedback, a lot of times, people can have update fatigue and people can be like, well, when are things coming? And it feels like there's just endless churn. So trying to provide a little bit more communication, a little bit more heads up with how things are rolling out without the challenge. The other thing is over promising and under delivering,
and that's the bonus of having an unstable branch, is that you can do things like that, I suppose.
I was just going to say that's really unique, and one of the big strengths that Project Zomboid has is you can look back into B41 and go, okay, well, looking across how this feature and how people interact with it over a super long period of time, how it's kind of turned out, how it affected long-term play, especially with a game as complicated and in-depth as Zomboid. How does that affect 6 months of in-game play, a year of in-game play? How is it affecting new players as this coming in? And then you can see as those changes roll out into unstable, okay, well, what's people's initial reaction? What do they feel when they see it, i.e., big Reddit threads or Steam or initial creator responses? And then how do people actually play with it? How does it actually affect gameplay? Because a lot of times how it makes you feel versus how you actually react to it as a player are two different things. And then gauging those things and be able to tweak and move those dials. I understand it can be frustrating for, players in Unstable. I've been in other projects or as a player in other projects that are kind of in that mainly like open source development where you're like, wait, why is this like this now? This is different. I don't understand. But in general, I think it can lead to a more coherent, backed up experience for the player, which I think, the Indie Stone has demonstrated over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, again, going back to the beauty of having an unstable branch is that if the players have a reaction to something and it's particularly negative, you can change that, you can take it back, you can take it under the hood, as you said, and make some changes to it. And it's interesting what you said as well about how the initial reaction can be, and the feelings associated to that can often be different to how players respond to it. And especially, I think, over time, that can change, particularly because as players start to adapt to this new thing, if we take Muscle Strain as like a big example of that, when Muscle Strain came into the game, I remember a particularly vocal response on the negative side from a large part of the community. And now I feel like now that it's been adjusted and tweaked a bit and it's more in like a more forgiving place, I think people see the purpose of Muscle Strain, at least the majority, and are happy to play with it enabled rather than just outright disabling it. So it's interesting to see how opinions change or how players adapt to certain features over time.
Yeah, and it's also in Project Zomboid's case, the fact that, like you mentioned, there are sandbox options and there are options that you can adjust yourself, is actually seeing what are those things that people affect. How do they change things on their multiplayer servers, on their private runs? What mods are people enabling? All of that long-term behavior can be used to inform design decisions in a way that, a traditional, AAA game studio, on Halo Reach, we paid hundreds of people, to go, bang on this feature, and you would have them do reports. You would watch them. If you ever look at any of the stuff that Jamie Gressimer, the game designer, really pioneered a lot of gameplay, UX testing standards. Those folks aren't necessarily still your player base. And, what you feel and what you say and what you do, oftentimes there's differences in those things.
We mentioned design decisions in there, and I would imagine that you have more than a few thoughts on where you'd like Project Zomboid to go next. What can players expect both over the next few months and longer term over the next couple of years?
So that's a great question that I won't be able to fully answer. In the short term, you can probably tell what I've been focused on, a lot of UI and UX friction that was there, and there still is UI and UX friction, but trying to consolidate interactions to make things a little more consistent with how they flow, hit pain points, hit balance issues, hit things like default, the game mode revamp with things like occupation changes to support changes and gameplay that's been introduced in B42. That's really what I've been focused in on the short term. Everything is a collaborative effort at the Indie Stone. This isn't me sitting in an ivory tower going, change this and do this, and there's no such thing as a idea person that just sits around and hey, wouldn't it be neat if we did this? There's libraries and libraries and libraries of that just from the team of years and years and years of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? There's no shortage of cool ideas. I'm not going to come up with something that this team hasn't already thought of before. So yeah, without getting into a lot of specifics of like, this is what we're going to do in 2 years and it's going to be amazing, we're going to be following the general roadmap that's been set forward by the team for years.
Okay, fabulous. And I apologize, I am going to have to ask, do you have any sneak peeks that you or the team are willing to share with the community today on this interview?
Well, let's see. In the short term, there definitely is some more changes coming to occupations and traits. Those are going to be rolled out relatively soon. It was interesting reactions to the last update to a couple traits. Be interesting to talk about why those changes are made. But one key little thing is Smoker might get a little bit of a buff, both from a trait perspective and a loot perspective. There's some other features that I'd love to talk about, but I'm literally like hours away from getting 100% confirmation.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
hey, I'm sure, like, if you wanted to, I'm sure we can pop that down in the comments when the video comes out, and I can tell that you want to tell us more, and that means more often than actually giving us the features. On a similar note, I feel like I'm already going to know the answer to this one, but I feel like I have to ask just for the sake of everybody watching, just to say that I've tried. Can you tell us anything about when Build 42 will be fully released on the stable branch of Project Zomboid?
So stable is planned to release exactly when it's ready to go stable.
Fantastic answer. Very much what I expected.
Yeah, that's about as far as I can go. That is absolutely the deciding factor. There's still features to tweak. There's still tons of bugs to fix. There's still a pathway ahead of us, but that window is getting narrower. And I think you noticed that probably through the updates. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we've seen a lot more focus on rather balancing and fixes than the implementation of new features over the last couple of months, which is perhaps longer as well, which is a good sign. I think that, like you say, you're narrowing down that gap. On a similar note, how do you feel about Build 42 and the community response so far? Do you feel it's been well received, or are there things that the team would still like to change?
that is a great question. And hitting the last point first, there are a million things that the team would like to change. Everything that I look at, the community, how they've responded to things, and I, look at that in a variety of different ways. And then we've got the team and a lot of different opinions and feelings and diversity on the team from, all around the world to the style of games that they play. And so everybody's going to have a different opinion, especially with something like Project Zomboid. Oh my gosh, you changed Apocalypse. That's amazing. Oh my gosh, you changed Apocalypse. I hate you forever. Why do you do it? The reaction, I think, has been critical in general by the community to B42, yet constructive. And that is the key to sorting out, to kind of digging into stuff. It can be really hard to, set aside constructive feedback and valid complaints and just and knee-jerk reactions. If we look at something like the map changes with Echo, this change, it makes sense. It supports some other things. There's very strong logical reasons to do it. But one, it makes people feel like something's been taken away, even if that is not the intention. And two, it breaks everybody's saves, which sucks and we don't want to do. But there's also this other save breaking issue. So if we compare these up together, it's going to at least localize the pain and instead of spreading it out. So yeah, that's the right decision to make. Now, of course, then you have to go through the pain points of, yes, your run was destroyed, your character was destroyed. That sucks. But it's leading to a stronger game. That stable release, which is the majority of the players, the majority of folks are going to be, hey, there's, cool, I've been playing B41 for all this time, and now there's a new update, and it's called B42. What's this look like? And thinking about their experience as well, and while also appreciating the folks that, signed up for the ride that is unstable and seeing things change and fluctuate and break sometimes, which is never fun for anybody.
I think, to be fair, there's, and perhaps I'm allowed to say this, and perhaps you wouldn't want to, then that's more than fair, but perhaps a bit of a hot take. Things like save breaks have to be expected. If you're opting into an unstable branch of a game, unfortunately, and I hate to say it, it's unstable at times, and it's going to happen. However, I like that you've acknowledged that the team don't like doing that and try to pair up a couple of issues at the same time, so that like perhaps that's less common. And I think also there's the perception of, okay, that yes, this is happening a little bit more often now, but we're also seeing updates every month. So it's going to happen a bit more often because we're seeing more updates.
Yeah, and it's a perpetual challenge, right? It's you know, on one hand, I haven't gotten any updates. What's changing? I want to have the capability to give feedback on these new features. Okay, well, let's put it out faster. Oh, my game's breaking all the time, or this is changing. You know, I just logged in and now traits are different, and you know, last week they weren't, and it's changing all the time. I want it to be like this, and you know, both of those things are in conflict. Everybody's human, developers and players and everybody. You know, I as a user or a player. I just want everything, you know, done and awesome right now in every game that I play and in every application that I use. You know, that's obviously what we want. For example, a trait adjustment, theoretically, from a development standpoint, that's just changing a number, right? So you change a number and you have to smoke test it and make sure, you know, you didn't accidentally change it to a negative number, or, you know, it didn't break anything. Once that's in, it's a relatively safe change. So, you know, from a traditional game development standpoint, you wouldn't ever, you know, release, you know, that kind of thing as like a test of like, let's change this and, you know, and understand how people adjust to it. You would just say, well, I'm a game designer and, you know, I looked at all the data and this is this is how we're going to do it. We're going to change it and it's going to sit. And then right at the end, after you play tested it a lot and you really, you know, feel comfortable with it, then you release it. Unstable is unstable, and things are going to break, things are going to change. I know, for example, right now we looked at controllers. You couldn't use firearms and controllers. Okay, let's adjust based on that. Oh, well, that's not working, you know, for these players. Let's adjust that. Let's tweak that. We could have tried to put that over in a box and really, you know, do it perfect and then release it. But then we wouldn't have all that feedback because it's not like you have a lot of isometric survival hardcore games to go out and be like, what's the best controller implementation out of these like 50 games like you can do with a shooter?
It's certainly within its own niche, isn't it, Project Zomboid?
Yeah.
There's not many other similar games to it. And just to sort of summarize what we've been talking about there, so the response has been critical but constructive, and it's fair to say that it's been useful for you guys when making some changes through the unstable branch. I would also just like to take the opportunity to say to any of the viewers watching this as well, if you feel you have any feedback on the current build or the version of the game that you're currently playing, please feel free to put it down in the comments. Let the team know what you enjoyed, what you haven't enjoyed, and why, most importantly, because I can tell you for sure that I'm sure Christian and other members of the team will be reading through some of the comments to this one in particular. I do just want to go back to one thing that we talked about in the midst of that question there, which was the fairly controversial removal of Echo Creek as a spawn location. So what prompted that decision from the team? What was the thinking behind that, if I may ask?
Well, that's a great question. And so the few different elements went into that discussion. So one thing, there's some underlying features, like I talked about before. There is some underlying features that I'm hoping are going to be out soon that Echo Creek didn't support from a core element. Echo Creek, in the way it was designed, was really designed and built and intended as a test bed. If you look at Echo Creek from a feature standpoint, basements, animals, crafting, workstations, every single new feature that was as a high-level feature for B42, it's not a coincidence that all of those things are showcased in Echo Creek. It was intended as a test bed for those things. It would not have been a good player experience to be like, hey, if you really want to experience animal husbandry, jump into Muldraw, because it's a really great place to collect up some cows and, build a farm and experience those features. From a player experience standpoint, however, I did suffer from a few limitations. One, a newer player, because of the way it was designed and the way it was built, you are strongly encouraged to not to leave the area, right? You have this magical building that's a gas station and has a cool basement that spawns tons of crafting and building materials. You have farms all over the place. You have a river right there. And then if you don't get a good vehicle spawn, guess what you get to do? You get to go on a very, very long walk through very, very scary trees. And if you go north and hit Guts and Corium, you are going to have a very, very bad day as a new player. So difficulty ramp for midterm was not great. So a lot of factors went into that point. Again, there's going to be some new stuff rolling out soon that couldn't go out along with that update that I think people are going to be very excited about. It's not 100%, so I gotta follow the rules of not saying exactly what it is, but it will provide more options to players in general, especially the more hardcore players. One of the mods that I made that helped get me this job was called Choose Your Spawn, where you can spawn anywhere in the map. So I understand both the desire to have different options and support the lore, the storytelling. Again, I have to think about both the long-term players experience, the midterm players experience, and the brand new players experience that's coming in. And if you put someone in a situation right away where it's like, hey, this is the easy place to spawn, cool, great. I read everywhere that this is the easy place where I should start, and now I'm having a negative experience 20 hours in because I followed that advice and that was the option or that was the default, then that's not a great experience for them. So a lot of factors went into it, and again, the save breaking part of it was not great. We have those other tile set issues that likely would have caused that at the same time for a good chunk of folks as well.
Yeah, it's par for the course, right, when it comes to unstable. Unfortunately, that's going to happen from time to time. But that leads me on to my follow-up question about Echo Creek. So having heard the community feedback on this and clearly being aware of how it's being talked about, are there any plans at this time to reverse the change, or are you waiting for those features that we're talking about here to come out before anything like that gets decided?
Yeah, so, the latter is going to be the quote unquote official answer. There's additional features coming online. So no, the straight up answer as far as reversing the change, no. That's not currently in the plan.
Okay, so the Extinction mode has been in player hands for a little while now. I have played more than one playthrough on that so far. How do you feel about the community response to this new way to play? It's
been exhilarating and fascinating. And scary. When we sat down and looked at game modes as a core object, a core feature set, and what did we want to address, and it was identified as what really ended up in as being game modes. It was what is real, what is actually what is the core intended experience of Project Zomboid, and that didn't necessarily exist, at least as players experienced it, right? People didn't, some people would think, oh, well, Survivor is where you should start, and Apocalypse is the default. No, it's this, it's that, and Builder was there for the more building style players, but the core settings didn't necessarily support that really well. So the two additional things that we talked about was a lot of the really experienced players, what do? They start amping up the difficulty. They start, jacking up those numbers, and that's what they tend to do to give themselves more challenge. And so just really diving into providing a game mode experience, like this is, designed and intended to be like that for experienced players. New players, please don't start like this. It's going to be, well, you can. If you really want to dive in, and then just really sitting with the sandbox settings, it's exhilarating as a game designer to have those options available to you, because a lot of times as a game developer, when you don't have those kinds of things exposed as just levers to pull, and you're having to be more like, well, let's change this math and change these core things, and you're really fundamentally changing the core of the game in every lever that you pull. you have to be much more conservative. Where something like Extinction, it can be like, yes, this is going to kill you. This is going to be chaotic and exciting, and you are going to have to work really hard for this, and it is going to feel like an accomplishment.
Yeah, I think Extinction for me personally, and then this is my own opinion coming into this, like I felt as someone with just shy of 2,000 hours in the game and that has played it for years now, it still felt like a new experience, which was something that I don't get very often with Project Zomboid anymore. So to be able to jump into Extinction and genuinely think like, oh, okay, this is new, this is going to be a real challenge, was very interesting indeed for me, because we can try mods and mods do change the game in a lot of ways, but to get this like official game mode change was a real sort of treat for me personally. And although there are perhaps tweaks that could be made, I think generally speaking, I was very, very pleased when Extinction came around. So just to follow up on this question that I had, are we likely to see adjustments to the Extinction mode over the next few updates?
Yeah, there definitely are some changes coming. I'd say they're relatively minor, as opposed to the last pass with, for example, day sprinters. And so that was a relatively big knob to pull. And like you identified, it was kind of, I think you mentioned it like in one of your very early streams, like this feels like it should be day sprinters. And I was like sitting there going like,
it was something I changed straight away. It was, in fact, I never actually played Extinction with that original speed setting. I watched somebody else play it and immediately said like, okay, that seems like an oversight. I'm going to change that so that there's sprinters during both the day and night, and immediately got that like, first house I was in, alarm went off, sprinters were everywhere. It just felt straight away like, okay, this is something new and exciting, and like it's really challenging straight out the gate.
It's funny because it really was kind of an oversight, because when I went through those options, I didn't know that specific one would block the sprinters. Because of the way the systems interact, if it only applies the random sprinter percentage if random is enabled. So by disabling random during the day, also zeroed out the sprinters. So it was kind of like, oh yeah, that's not quite where it needed to be.
I'm going to go to something else now, which is, we've touched on it briefly. Recently, we saw some pretty substantial changes to occupations and traits. Is the team now happy with where everything is in this department, or can we expect some further balancing tweaks?
There's a few more things coming. As I mentioned before, there will be some more tweaks to both occupations and traits. The last update, 42.16, was the big pass, right? Like, we want to hit these high-level goals of making occupations feel more like occupations and having them be more impactful and not just I have a carpentry background, I want to feel like a carpenter. So that was the big pass. Same with traits. It's interesting because I've seen a lot of the speculation, right? There's the motivations behind changes of this was changed because too many people use it, or it's too good, or whatever. Really the motivation behind that was looking at the changes that have been rolled out in B42 with things like darkness, the new lighting system, the massive impact that the lighting changes from a gameplay perspective have had on the game, and as well as things like sleep. Pillows are now a thing. Those are a big benefit to sleeping. When you stack those together, you end up with characters that can essentially rock and roll all day long on 3 hours of sleep. That's very powerful. That's really strong. That's good. Cool, you like it. That's more powerful than, here's one change that's going to come out that I'll slip off. Nutritionist is 4 points. That's really expensive to give you information about calorific, inputs. So I'm going to pull that down.
Okay.
There I sneaked out a feature. That's
a sneak peek. We'll take that one.
Yeah. So there will be a few more tweaks like that. The next pass that you're going to see is mainly in a few occupations that were too expensive. There's going to be at least one trait that gets cheaper on the positive side and at least one trait that gives you a little bump on the negative side. Chef, for some reason, at a certain point along the way, got changed to short blunt instead of short blade. I think I used the wrong letter code in there, and blunt and blade snuck through the testing process. Wait, does that say blunt? That's supposed to say blade.
I did wonder about that one. There were a couple of creators that shared that one with me and were like, was this meant to be like short bladed? I was like, I don't know, like this seems, but okay, brilliant. That's a really interesting sort of insight into what's going to happen going forward. A question about crafting now. The community has been quite vocal, myself included, about their struggles with the current crafting interface. Is this something that the team has heard? And if so, are there any plans towards improvements?
Well, I would say absolutely it has been heard. UI and UX was one of my really big early focuses to try to identify where we could clean up pain points in the short term. There have been a lot of core changes and improvements, although they tend to sometimes get lost in the wash with like how recipes are searched for, right? Like how the returns items instead of string names, like things like that like do improve the process. I do want to acknowledge that UI interaction across the board, when you look at features across the board, there's a lot of things that you as an experienced player, because I'm guessing that most of the folks that are watching this are they're relatively hardcore PC players. Like, how the vehicle menu works, and how you interact with it, and you understand like, oh right, I can right click on a tire, the little tire name, and that pops up the menu, and that's how I change a tire, and that's how it works. That is completely inconsistent in multiple different places across the interface. How you interface with a TV is different than how you interface with a car. That is more of a long-term project to bring consistency across the board in all of those various features. The short, honest answer is you're not going to see in the short term big fundamental changes to the way those interfaces work. There's continuing polish that'll come in, and I can't specify how exactly those are going to roll out. You should not expect in a month that you're going to open up and crafting is going to have a completely different interface and work in a completely different way. That's going to be more of a long-term project.
100%. I think that was a really good answer. I know you were a big advocate for the re-implementation of certain right-click options. Was this due to players struggling with the new crafting systems?
Well, it was integrated. It was all game design systems touch each other, right? As B42 expanded its feature set, the core interaction element of previous iterations of Project Zomboid were built around right-click. If you right-clicked on a battery charger, it worked one way. If you had all the potential materials to build things and you right-clicked on a tile, you would see what you could build in that tile. Well, that worked when you could use carpentry to build 8 different things or 10 different things, and you could use welding to build 6 different things. But as soon as you can build 30 different things or craft 30 different things, that starts to break down. You get massive lists and massive stuff that's really hard. When they were putting in those interactions, different interpretation on build or interact or read or, turn on or turn off, all these different terminologies for things. And there was kind of a shift to look at trying out different systems. Like if you look at how, say, for example, fireplaces, tagging onto the actual loot window object, interaction buttons there, that's cool, and that's cool as an option. But then when it was like, cool, you can interact with that over here. Well, let's pull that out of right mouse click button. Now players don't understand how to interact with it. They can't find it. They don't understand where it is. They're confused, and confused players are unhappy players. So is there a way in the short term that we can kind of bring this more into a consistent system that through interacting with it, you as a player can look and go, oh, okay, I see a window-shaped thing in the world. I right-click on it. There's now a window-shaped icon with a name, and here's how I can contextually interact with that window. Okay, cool. Now, inventory, which works in a completely different way than tiles, I want to right-click on that and interact with things in a certain way. Okay, well, then how's that bleed over into crafting? And that, that's where kind of the integration of, contextual crafting made its way back into that right mouse click menu, but in a more consistent fashion that felt like they all kind of work together. The other thing that change allowed us to do was, if you notice, trying to prioritize items that you need to do under stress. Removing broken glass from a window is way high up. Removing curtains is farther down, because generally you're not going to be like, oh, I got 5 zombies in the thing, let's take curtains off the windows. You're like, I need to get the glass out so I can climb through really fast. Like, that's what I want to do. And so, that's what drove a lot of that. Same with barricading. A lot of times you're barricading under stress. You want to be able to do it quickly. You're not building stairs under stress. Like, you're generally not like, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of zombies coming, I need to build a set of stairs to get on the roof. You just run away. So.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a very big thing for me, was having gotten used to all these systems over such a big amount of time, was like going to barricade a window in the way that I knew, which was to right click, and then being so surprised when it was under like a carpentry menu in the building menu. So I'm glad that you touched on that, and I think it's a very positive change that we're seeing these things coming back to the right click menu.
Yeah, and that's a good example of, looking at consistent feedback over the course of, when that change was made. I should be clear, this is not like a, idea that Christian came up with of like, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. Like literally it was, I came on, it was like, go work on the right mouse click menu, like make it better. That was like day one, direction. And spent a lot of time, with RJ and the different team members, like working through, okay, well, how's that going to work with this tile and how can we make it better? So it wasn't just like, to be very clear, it wasn't like, hey, I had this cool idea. Maybe we can put barricade on back on right mouse click menu. That'd be neat.
So moving away from the crafting now, I do just want to ask more of like more of a trivial question. With zero expectation, if you could implement a single feature for Project Zomboid, what would it be and why?
Oh, that is a great question. And I'll use that to cover as I formulate my response. What always impressed me both as a player and a designer is the depth of the systems in Project Zomboid and the emergent gameplay that comes out of that. So one of the things that I'm really excited to look at, besides high level, big high level things like NPCs, looking at how that's going to roll out very long term, but more like longer term depth in things like medical systems. I would love to explore diabetics in the apocalypse. I would love to have that moment of I'm in multiplayer and my teammate got sepsis because they didn't take care of their wounds. They didn't clean their wounds. They got zombie blood and it led to a bigger infection. They have sepsis. Hey, we need to go hit the hospital to get the really good antibiotics, not the stuff that we're going to find at the pharmacy. We need to go on a run to save our teammate. Like those kinds of long-term systems, for example, just sticking with that example of not like, oh, I have an infection and so, I might take damage and I might die in the next thing. So I got to pour alcohol in it. It's like, it's more of like, well, if I clean my wounds early on, I won't get an infection. If I do get an infection, there's antibiotics. If it grows to this, it hits this. And how that drives players, thinking about like, gas spoilage, things like that. To me, that's really, really cool. And exploring that long-term meta. One of the visions that were set forth is that long-term experience of rebuilding civilization, of being able to cross over that hump from the Extinction into, you know, the Rising. Exploring those things is really, really exciting for me in a way that supports still that immediate, you know, Dawn of the Dead type experience.
I just want to say, Christian, thank you very much for taking the time today for the interview. Are there any final messages that you want to convey to the Project Zomboid community before we finish this up?
Well, I think the main thing that I just want you to take away is that this is how you died. And sorry, that's what's going to happen. It's all for naught, but keep trying. You can make it someday.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Christian. So that was my interview with Christian Allen, design director of Project Zomboid. Hopefully you found this insightful as to what's going on behind the scenes. But if there's anything you'd like to know that I didn't ask about in this interview, once again, please feel free to ask down in the comments. Huge thank you, as always, to my Patreon supporters for backing the channel. And if you want to join them, there is a link down in the description of this video. Thanks, folks, and I will see you all in the next one. So if you didn't see it already, a new update for Project Zomboid's Build 42 Unstable branch has landed as of the 20th of April, and while this video probably isn't going to be a long one with the update contents being relatively small, there's been some new stuff worth learning about and some further balancing changes to things like occupations and the new sandbox presets. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe for regular Zomboid updates, and as always, a link to the full patch notes will be down in the description. Let's kick off with the new implementations from update 42.17.0. So, going right in with one of the biggest features from this update, there are now additional static spawn locations that can be chosen through the sandbox options. While you won't see the same level of diversity as you would when spawning in the intended starter towns like Rosewood or Muldraw, this does allow for easy customization of your experience, especially when creating a challenge scenario using mods, or if you just want to explore some new locations. Some of the new spawn points include the new towns added in Build 42, such as Irvington or Brandenburg, smaller locales like Valley Station or Phallus Lake, and we've even seen the return of Echo Creek, which was rather controversially removed from the regular spawn selection menu in a recent update. To me, this is a good sign that community feedback is being heard, and I'd encourage everyone at home to voice fair and constructive criticism on the IndieStone Discord, their forums, or in the comment sections of videos like this one. The developers definitely seem to be listening. Now, prior to this update, VHS tapes were available to increase the XP gains for a few select skills, that primarily being ones associated to shows on the Life and Living channel alongside mechanics. With this update, however, there will now be VHS tapes available for all of the skills shown on your screens now. And what I'd specifically like to draw your attention to here is that the aiming skill is included in this list, which will potentially finally make the use of firearms that require higher skill levels more attainable for the average survivor. This is something I'm really glad to see and should make the harder to grind skills like blacksmithing or napping much easier if you can find the right VHS tapes. Alongside these major changes, there have also been a couple of smaller ones, such as the speed at which a fluid container empties now being dependent on the type of container itself, a new book being added called The Moments of Darius, and some new content for the survival guide to assist new players. I will also take a moment to mention that further changes to controller support have been implemented in this update, and while I'm not a controller player myself, so I can't speak as to how positive these changes actually are, the dev team have made a note that they want players using controllers to continue to provide them with feedback because it's been incredibly helpful as they continue to adjust the control scheme. Next, we're looking at balancing changes, and we're starting off with some small tweaks to the sandbox difficulty presets. In Apocalypse, the chance for vehicles to spawn with gas has been increased from low to normal. However, it's important for me to note that the preset normal value has been reduced from 70 to 45. So while it is a buff, it's not as big of a buff as it may first seem. The other category has had its loot spawn rates increased from 0.6 to 0.8, and lastly, wound infection damage factor has now increased from 0 to 1.0. This has also been applied to the Extinction, Rising, and Outbreak presets as well. While I've never really tampered with this setting myself, my understanding is that this will now cause infected wounds to deal actual damage to your health, rather than just causing your character pain. So make sure you're taking care of those scratches, keeping yourself clean, and disinfecting your bandages from now on. Right, we're moving on to some further changes to the occupations and traits now, starting with the chef that has seen their level in short blunt weaponry swapped back to a level in short blade, which seems to have been an error that has now been corrected. The DIY expert now gives you the inventive trait instead of a level in the carving skill, and their points cost has changed from -4 to -2, which could make them a very real contender for one of the best occupations in this build currently. Both the doctor and the nurse occupations have had their cost change from -2 to 0. The electrician has gone from -4 to -2, the rancher from -2 to 0, and lastly, the welder is now -4 points as opposed to the prior -6 points. The only other notable change is that the farmer now provides a level in the strength skill, though I'm not really sure if this will make it an occupation that gets chosen much until we see further changes to farming itself. As for traits, nutritionist has been adjusted from -4 points to -2. The high thirst trait now provides +2 points instead of the previous singular point, and smoker has been changed from +2 points to +3. Personally, I'm very happy to see changes to these couple of negative traits, especially because these are common choices for me and will give me an extra 2 points to work with, but I would be eager to hear what you guys think of the occupations and traits changes down in the comments, as well as what you would change about this area of the game if you had the opportunity. Now, for our avid livestock farmers out there that have been struggling with the effects of zombies and stress in the last few updates, you'll be glad to know that this has seen some big rebalancing in this patch. Animals will now gain less stress overall from zombie presence, sounds, and rain, with stress being reduced further when the player is petting them. They will only start to destroy objects when reaching a stress value of 80 as opposed to the previous 70. These changes should make it easier to keep animals under control, especially in multiplayer environments where it can be hard to keep tabs on them at all times. In other areas, respirator filters and gas masks will now drain far slower when dealing with the stench of corpses, something that's going to make extinction runs a little easier to manage going forward, and appropriate tools will degrade much slower when completing tailoring recipes. Carpentry XP rewards have now been adjusted for wood floors of level 2 and 3, softening beams, tannin barrels, and churn buckets, although exactly how they've been adjusted is not mentioned in these patch notes, so I can't really say whether this is positive or negative at this time. Finally, we come to the portion of the video where we highlight the most prominent fixes, both multiplayer specific and otherwise. So as always, I will take this opportunity to remind you that there will be a link to the full patch notes in the description, since I can't possibly hope to cover every single fix in this list. That said, here's the ones that I think you need to know about. Largest of the fixes for multiplayer in this month's patch is the fix to zombie speed settings, which will now allow for players to enable sprinters in multiplayer if that's what they want to do. Previously, even if you had them enabled, for some reason they didn't work in multiplayer settings. Fair warning here, sprinters are incredibly difficult to deal with even in small numbers, and in multiplayer environments they can be a bit buggy, so proceed at your own risk. I also noticed that map progress has been moved to a server-side operation instead of the client being responsible for it. I'm not 100% sure on what this means because it wasn't in the patch notes, but I hope this means that players will no longer see their map knowledge transferred from previous server wipes, but again, I really can't say until it's been tested further. Explosives such as pipe bombs and aerosol bombs will now do damage to players and animals, something that wasn't functioning properly prior to this update, which I imagine could have caused some issues in PvP environments. Once again, we've seen another fix to the issue that causes players to spontaneously strip off their clothing. I say again because this was in another update under the list of fixes recently and has since reappeared. Sorry nudists, no fun for you in this particular update. A bug in multiplayer that caused doors to open and close repeatedly after only one button press has now been fixed, something that again I think we've seen returning over multiple patches now. Hopefully this is the last we see of this particular problem, because I cannot tell you how easy it is to die in Extinction mode when you're running from sprinters thanks to this bug. Climbing over walls was not causing muscle strain prior to this update, which has now been fixed, as well as exercise not raising the character's body heat value. Last of the major multiplayer updates, zombies should no longer teleport when being hit, although I suspect we will still see at least some pathing issues and bugs relating to zombie tracking before multiplayer reaches the stable branch. As for more general stuff that encompasses both single and multiplayer, there have been a handful of fixes relevant to controller players that should stop things like sporadic actions taking place when the controller is at rest, interactions being fixed for some items that previously wouldn't work, and fixes to certain context menu interactions. Certain animations were previously not functioning correctly when the character was seated, which has now been fixed, along with some missing collisions with items of furniture. Characters will now sneeze and cough when they have a cold as intended, which wasn't working in the previous version, and you will no longer be able to sleep on a swing set, which is something that I didn't even realize was possible, but apparently it was before this update. Lastly, there have been a range of fixes to sound effects, including a bug with the M16 sounds when at maximum zoom, and incorrect sounds being played when driving over live zombies that are on the ground. So that's just about it for everything you'll need to know from this update. I appreciate this video was a bit shorter than my usual, but this was of course a smaller update. All the same, I will aim to keep you guys in the loop as further updates are released, so make sure you subscribe for more videos like this one. I've also been branching out into some other zombie content recently, so if you're feeling a bit of burnout with Project Zomboid on the long road to build 42 multiplayer reaching the stable branch, you might want to check out my last video. It'll be appearing on your screens now, so you can go ahead and click on it if you're interested. Thanks folks, and I will see you all in the next one. It's taken a couple of months to get there in amongst the monthly updates for Project Zomboid since the start of the year, but the modding scene is finally starting to look like it's back in full force with both some innovative new creations and updated fan favorites. In this video, I'll be taking a look at a selection of mods from the last couple of months, most of which will be fully usable in multiplayer. A link to a Steam Workshop collection with every mod shown in this video will be down in the description as well. Let's kick things off with a groundbreaking new mod that has brought in a feature the community has been requesting for years now. This is the horse mod, and while it is one of the few mods in this video that only work in single player, I just had to cover it because this is a mod that can completely change the experience you'll have in a Project Zomboid playthrough. Now, RV Nomad runs have been a long-term staple in this community for years. Now we have the option of removing the vehicle entirely and instead riding on horseback through a broken world. The horse itself has multiple movement speeds, you can jump over small fences while at a gallop, and you can even kick zombies by the side of your horse using the standard push keybind. Horses require an entirely different kind of maintenance to mechanical vehicles, as you'd probably expect. You'll need to ensure that they are well fed, watered, and much like livestock, protected from the rotten grasp of the undead. The horses in this mod are available in 4 different breeds with 2 color variants for each breed. For players looking to use horses for full loot runs or a full nomad experience, there's equipment available for your noble steed like saddlebags to store loot and saddles to reduce character pain while riding them. Sure, the mod isn't available in multiplayer just yet, and there are a few smaller issues that need to be worked out, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the creators of this mod have brought something to Zomboid that the wider community has been after for a very long time now. Oh, and if you're already wishing medieval Zomboid were a thing now that you've seen horses, well, this next mod takes us one step closer to that very scenario. This is medieval Medieval Z, a mod that brings knightly weapons and armor to Kentucky in all of their glory. Medieval Z contains a whole range of items, including 4 new helmets, over 12 armor pieces, several new weapons like swords, spears, and hammers, decorative clothing like tabards, and even shields for your offhand and sheaths for your swords. Every item in this mod can be crafted in the vanilla crafting menu with the help of 3 recipe magazines that you'll need to find out in the world, and it's completely compatible with multiplayer environments. The armor in Medieval Z is designed to be one step above the highest tier of armor available in vanilla Zomboid. But if I could give you just one piece of advice here, make sure you disable the discomfort modifier in the sandbox settings to get the most out of this mod, or your character is going to get upset fast when wearing a full set of armor. Combine Medieval Z with the horse mod, and all we really need now is a suitably medieval map to play on. Modders, consider this a formal request from me. I would love to be slaying zombies in the hall of an ancient castle, or walking through a quaint little thatch roof village on horseback sometime in the not too distant future. So the last mod we looked at in this video is usable in multiplayer, and you've likely already noticed that I'll be displaying whether each mod in this video is currently functional in multiplayer or just single player only at the top corner of the screen during the mod's introduction. Now, if you're looking to play Project Zomboid, mods or otherwise, in a multiplayer setting with your friends, then you need look no further than today's sponsor, Bisect Hosting. Now, having hosted multiplayer servers on Zomboid for years now, the two things that matter most are reliability and easy setup. Bisect Hosting offers instant deployment for your server across 21 global locations and 100 different games, as well as scaling RAM allowances that allow for top-notch performance even on larger Zomboid servers when the horde starts building and things get a little crazy. Perhaps most importantly though, Steam Workshop support is fully integrated, so adding mods to your server is a breeze. So if you want to get started in your own brand of Kentucky's favorite apocalypse, click the link in the description and use code Mr. Atomic Duck for 25% off your first month using Bisect Hosting. Coming up, we've got more multiplayer compatible mods, starting with a new firearms collection named Gale Gun Store. Now, I like to take a look at firearms mods once in a while because I know it's an area of the game that a lot of players enjoy, especially since the vanilla version of Project Zomboid doesn't feature them too heavily. If you want more variety when it comes to firearms, this mod is going to be an easy choice, with over 320 different weapons from vastly different time periods and over 280 attachments to customize them with, including functional suppressors, lasers, and interchangeable magazines. Now, Gale Gun Store doesn't just use context menus when it comes to modifying your zombie killer of choice. It comes with its own customization interface with some fantastic visual representation of the changes that you're making. On the right-hand side of this screen, you can see exactly how modifications will affect weapon statistics. Now, I'm by no means a firearms expert, but I feel like this mod would be a fantastic option for players that want to see more guns in the game and some associated mechanics to enhance that experience. Our next mod in today's video is single player only, but absolutely worth mentioning purely because it adds something I don't think I've ever seen in Zomboid before, mods or otherwise. This is the Throwing Weapons mod, which brings a total of 8 thrown items to the game that can directly take down zombies without drawing as much attention as the currently available explosive options. These weapons of choice include spears, knives, axes, and even throwable sports balls that, while doing no damage to a zombie, are capable of knocking them over. It's also just good fun to bonk them over the head with a football, to be honest. The mod comes complete with a new perk in throwing that can be leveled over time, as well as a new knife thrower occupation choice and a new trait called Steady Arm that will aid in your efforts if you want to give throwing weapons a try. On top of all this, keep an eye out for throwing magazines and books while you're out looting to help give multipliers to your skill gains or provide crafting recipes for thrown weapons. While this mod isn't one that you'll be able to use when playing with your friends, hopefully that's something that comes in the future, and honestly, even if not, it's a great addition to any single player run. We're moving away from weapons next and over to vehicles, a cornerstone of any successful Zomboid run and famously a bit of a grind to level the associated mechanics skill for. Thanks to the mod Better Auto Mechanics though, this experience can be much easier and more intuitive. Better Auto Mechanics is an upgrade of the classic Auto Mechanics mod, now offering patch uninstall so you can remove all of, say, doors or all of the lights on a vehicle with the click of one button. It also comes with smart XP tracking, so if If you're not going to gain XP from dismantling a particular vehicle, the mod will alert you of this so that you're never wasting any time on something that's not worth doing, and it will never perform an action that isn't going to give you XP. Honestly, this is one of those mods that I feel is going to quickly become a must-have for many players, and is probably telling of some of the improvements that could be made to the vanilla mechanics skill. Until then though, better auto mechanics has you well covered. Now, while we're on the topic of vehicles, I think it's worth mentioning a mod that has very quickly risen to the top of the Steam Workshop over the last few months, that being realistic dashboard and gauges. As the name suggests, this completely replaces the current UI when driving a vehicle with a highly interactive alternative. You'll find all of the options of the vanilla version with some new additions, allowing you to change the radio station, air conditioning, or roll down a window, all from the dashboard without the need for extra menus. What I particularly like about this mod is that the dashboard is no longer only visible for the driver of a vehicle, but also for anyone riding in the front passenger seat. So if you're playing with friends in a multiplayer environment, they are more than welcome to take the role of passenger princess or road trip DJ while you drive. Another small detail that I very much appreciate is the more that you damage your vehicle, the more this damage is reflected in the UI of the dashboard, with cracks appearing in the glass and the check engine light moving through multiple stages of intensity as it becomes increasingly damaged. If it's realism you're after, this mod is a great complement to any playthrough and is fully compatible with the very popular KI5 car mods. Next up, we're taking a look at a mod on a much smaller scale, but certainly no less useful than the ones highlighted so far in this video. This is Distinguished Bolt Cutters, bringing functionality to an item that is otherwise just a very heavy melee weapon. These new and improved bolt cutters are capable of not only cutting through wire fences to give you new ways to access buildings, but more importantly, they can also cut locks on fence gates and garage doors. No longer will you have to stand there attacking a metal door for what seems like an eternity, building muscle strain only to be met with mediocre loot. Now it's just a case of finding some bolt cutters and making a couple of clicks. There's some additional sandbox settings for this mod in case you want to make some changes, allowing you to adjust the strength level requirements that you need for using bolt cutters, how long the act of cutting actually takes, and how much muscle strain is generated while doing so. This is one of those mods that's dead simple but incredibly beneficial, and something I'd love to see added to the vanilla game. Now, while we're looking at features that should be brought to the vanilla game, it's a perfect time to take a look at a couple of mods that rework existing mechanics in some new ways. This is Caffeine Makes Sense, and as the name suggests, it attempts to handle fatigue and stimulant items in a more realistic fashion. Right now, in the vanilla version of the game, drinking a coffee or taking caffeine pills simply removes a flat amount of fatigue, making your character less tired for a certain time. With this mod in play, consuming any item containing caffeine will instead start a gradual ramp of energy, which will come to a peak over time and then start to decay. Fatigue will continue to build, but as your caffeine levels also climb, you will be able to remain functional and push forward. Once your caffeine levels start to eventually drop off, that fatigue will catch up with your character and cause its usual negative effects. Taking too much caffeine will cause your character to become tense and jittery, as well as degrading their sleep quality. With this mod in play, fatigue is not just removed as it is in vanilla, instead it is delayed until your caffeine levels start to drop. It's an interesting take on existing mechanics that I think is worth a try. Now, the same creator of Caffeine Makes Sense has also made the mod Armor Makes Sense, which, as you can imagine, reworks the mechanics of armor in a similar way to the modder's outlook on caffeine and fatigue. Now, to understand this mod, first and foremost, it's important to know that discomfort from wearable items is completely removed. Effects on movement and combat speed are assigned by the region of the body that those items are protecting, and heavier armor will also drain endurance while running or fighting. On top of that, the mod attempts to simulate how armor would affect the temperature of the wearer, causing you to overheat quickly in the summer months, but allowing it to also keep you warm in the winter. Gas masks and respirators can reduce airflow, armor can reduce sleep quality, and higher tier crafted armor will, generally speaking, have less downsides than the thrown together alternatives built with scrap metal pieces. If, like myself, you're not a fan of the current discomfort system in vanilla and want to see armor given a better place in Project Zomboid, then this mod is well worth a go. Okay, so next up is a mod that attempts to give weather, seasons, and the time of day a bit more impact by simulating more realistic and immersive lighting conditions. If you're tired of seeing the same day over and over again, the mod Here Goes the Sun will be one to check out for yourself. The most noticeable feature of this mod is the redesigned sunrises and sunsets, coming in different shades based on the time of year and having different transitions based on the currently ongoing weather conditions. Even after the rise of the sun, a winter's day will be washed with grey and icy blue colours, whereas spring and summer will feel much brighter. Sure, this one isn't going to change any major mechanics, but if you're looking for extra levels of immersion, Here Goes the Sun is a great option. One thing I constantly find I'm being asked in the comments of my videos or on my live streams, especially by new players, is how I know which items to take and which ones to leave behind. The easy answer is that with time spent playing, this is something you'll eventually learn, but this next mod can be a great help when you're getting started to speed along that process. This is Item Rarity UI, which takes a similar approach to many RPG titles by highlighting the names of items in different colors, each representing a different level of rarity. I will say I don't think this mod is perfect. It does tag a few items as incredibly rare that I'd maybe disagree with, but overall it is a very useful tool for beginners, and I can almost guarantee that some other modders will pick up this template for other mods in the future that offer clothing, weapons, or item packs. Until then, I'd recommend this mod as a support tool for new players. And speaking of mods that add clothing or other items to the game, I'd like to take a look at Hardwood's Firefighter Finery next, a mod that brings a bit more variety and some visual improvements to firefighter hardware and uniforms. The clothing featured in this mod is a heavy-duty version of the vanilla items, so you'll still find the old stuff that you're used to, but there's new and improved versions also available with their own unique look. New jackets, new pants, even new respirators. To go with this new outfit you'll be wearing, there is also a handful of firefighting equipment that happens to double as some fantastic zombie slaying weaponry. You'll find a heavy-duty fire axe, a Halligan tool, and a couple of other options to fight with. I know this isn't covering a huge array of items like some other mods will, but sometimes it is quality over quantity, and this mod is a great example of just that. Now, one of the very small things about Project Zomboid that has annoyed me for a little while now is the way that coolers just don't have a function in vanilla. Sure, it's cool to stumble across a cooler stocked with beer, but you'd think that you could use the cooler itself to keep food fresh for a bit longer than normal. Well, with Sunshi's cooler system, you'll be able to do just that. While this mod is in play, you can add 1, 2, or 3 cold packs to a cooler, and any food within will be kept fresh for longer. The more cold packs you use, the longer it will keep, up to the maximum of 3. This can be incredibly helpful if you're going out on a loot run and want to keep the food you grab from the local Gigamart fresh until you get back to your safe house with your freezer, or if you're taking an extended road trip and want to make sure that you won't be eating stale food by the time you arrive. The mod is fully compatible with multiplayer, it works great with additional food mods like Vanilla Food Expanded, and it even brings in a crafting recipe so that you can create cold packs at your safe house with materials that you can find while scavenging. It is a well thought out solution for food preservation on the move that just makes sense. Now, very quickly before I wrap up this video, I've got a mod that will help you keep track of all of the updates your existing collection has been through. Sometimes we all suffer from stacking a playthrough with one too many mods and seeing an unexpected update prematurely end a playthrough, or if you run a multiplayer server of your own, sometimes it's just nice to know which mods have had recent updates so that you can keep track of any issues cropping up with your player base. This is where the mod Workshop Update Checker comes in, giving you a handy list of all of your mods that can be accessed on the main menu screen, complete with which ones are currently loaded, their version number, and when they were last updated. If a mod is updated while you are playing, you'll also be given a handy in-game notification that an update is available to download. There's no performance impact with this mod in play, it's incredibly lightweight, and will help those of you subscribed to hundreds of mods keep track of incoming updates. So that's it for all of the mods in today's video, but we've gone ahead and collected them into a workshop collection linked down in the description for easy access. If there's any other mods that I or anyone watching this needs to check out in the future, then please do let me know down in the comments below. I wanted to say one last thank you to Bisect Hosting for sponsoring this video, and again, you can purchase a Zomboid server with them using my link down in the description, then use code Mr. Atomic Duck for 25% off your first month. As always, very special thank you to my Patreon supporters, and I will see you all in the next one. Build 42, the long-awaited major update to Project Zomboid that was set to change the game we love in a multitude of ways. But are all of those changes actually for the better? I decided to take a community survey that collected real feedback from real players and ultimately find out if the Project Zomboid fanbase actually enjoys Build 42. So join me as we take a deep dive into those findings. Oh, and before we get too far into this one, the survey itself is linked down in the description if you still want to have your say. Now, in order to set the stage for the survey and make sure we knew what kind of players were providing feedback, we started out with a couple of questions to help provide context on the participant. Mainly, we made sure to ask if the individual had actually played Build 42. If they hadn't, the survey would stop there and they would also be prompted to leave the reason they haven't tried the new version just yet. As you would probably expect, the most common reasons were either that players were waiting for multiplayer to be available for Build 42, or they were waiting for it to reach the stable branch so they didn't have to experience bugs and potentially lose progress when updates were pushed. We had a grand total of 593 responses that made it past this qualifying question.
on. Where are the keys now? Wrong. Come on. Never.